Well, it was a great morning, wasn't it? I'm so excited about what we have coming up this afternoon, but it was really a terrific morning. Let's give a hand again to our speakers, please. Really wonderful. What a great program. Okay, so good afternoon. I'm pleased to introduce as our special lunchtime speaker at this plenary session, Bruce Katz. Bruce is Vice President of the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., and a regular advisor to federal, state, and local leaders on policies critical to the prosperity of urban areas, such as innovation, human capital, and city infrastructure. Mr. Katz has served as an advisor to the White House on housing and urban development and is a leading voice in reimagining the function and value of urban areas to properly influence their economic vitality, livability, and sustainability. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Bruce Katz.
So I just want to thank Pablo Farias and Darren Walker for asking me to do this. Juliet and Robert, Chancellor, that was about as powerful and inspiring and affirmative morning that I've witnessed in a very, very long time. And it's occurring on a campus. It's occurring on a campus which I think is really one of the most distinctive that I've seen in the United States, perfectly aligned with its natural and cultural landscape. You know, you go to so many universities around the country, and they look like they're either from medieval England or from Stalinist Russia. Beautiful campus at so many different levels. And before I start, and you'll get this sense as I go through this presentation, I was asked to talk about how small cities basically help grow their own economies, and by doing that, help fuel the economies of their states and ultimately the nation. Brownsville is the 128th largest metropolitan area in the United States. McAllen, which is a short commute for a Washingtonian, is the 70th largest metropolitan area in the United States. From the perspective, as you'll see from this presentation, of someone who works on cities and metropolitan areas, you're really one integrated economy. If you were joined up, you would be the 47th largest metro in the most powerful economy in the world. In some respects, you're not small, and you sit on the border with one of our largest trading partners and orient yourself to the Spanish-speaking world, which in the future will be America's future. So I think about this as I go through my presentation, because in the changing global economy, the aggregation of assets and attributes and population is absolutely critical to think about your prosperity. Here's the context for this presentation. The U.S. is still recovering, and it will take some time to recover. People are talking about this as a lost decade from the recession, close to 9 million jobs lost. We're now at 9% unemployed. We potentially could be at this level for quite some time, given the sluggish growth in private sector jobs and actually the scaling back of public sector jobs. We're at the highest poverty rate since the early 1990s. We have 46 million people living in poverty. And as you all know, the United States measures poverty at very, very low levels compared particularly to the Europeans. This is a different kind of recession. This is not like the recession in the early 80s, which you experienced in Texas, or in the early 90s, or the early part of the last decade. This was a national recession. 3 in 4 people either lost a job or knew someone who did. It always takes longer to recover from a financial-inspired recession, which is what this was, and we're experiencing that. So I'm going to talk about 3 things. The first because this was a different kind of recession, and it followed a decade of bad habits when the American economy was driven by consumption and debt and innovating in the wrong things. I'm going to start by presenting a different model for economic growth for the United States. It's an economy that is driven by exports and global engagement, powered by low carbon, where the U.S. is at the vanguard of the clean economy, fueled by innovation, not just ideas, but also production and deployment, and rich with opportunity. So this is a vision where the United States exports more, wastes less, actually innovates in what matters, then manufactures what we invent, and that actually works for working families. The second piece is the American economy is not uniformly distributed across our vast landscape, nor is the Texas economy. We are powered by metropolitan areas, cities, suburbs, exurbs, and their rural environs. This is a metropolitan century in the world, and therefore we need to think about, last point, how do we unleash the entrepreneurial energies of America's metros, both with national policy, state policy for sure, but frankly, more important, from the bottom up, the kind of networking and collaboration between the political, corporate, civic, university, and other sectors. So that's what I'll try to talk about today, and we'll start with the vision thing first. Again, at the heart of a vision for American growth is exports and global engagement. We have to have a vision where more firms trade more goods and services seamlessly with the world, particularly those countries that are rapidly urbanizing and industrializing, particularly with those countries, Canada and Mexico, that are on our border. We've crossed an economic Rubicon. Brazil, India, and China now have a greater share of global GDP than the United States, and that will grow over the next 5 years. China, India, Brazil are growing because they're urbanizing. For the first time in recorded history, more than half of the people in the world live in cities, and that will grow to 60% by 2030. The locus of economic power is shifting in the world because of this recession. In the last several years, the highest performers in the world are all located in Latin America and in Asia. And the sluggish performers still are in North America and in Europe. When we look across the world, what we see are much higher growth rates in our trading partners, but most importantly, in the BRICS, Brazil, India, and China. The U.S. has substantial trade with these countries already. As you can tell, Canada is our largest trading partner, followed by China, followed by Mexico. And we export to these countries, but frankly, we're importing more. And going forward, again, the U.S. has to begin to change some of this balance of trade and fully engage the world. Here's the challenge. Only 13% of our economy is dedicated to exports, compared to 30% in China, Canada, Mexico, and larger percentages in India, Japan, and the European Union. If you look around the United States, particularly in our major ports, and I'm thinking of Houston and LA, and some of the northern areas, our